Somewhere in this story, the world's most famous cursed gem, worth as much as $350 million, Minix, gets mailed across a country in a plain paper package. Postage, $2.44. No armored truck. No security detail. That, it turns out, is the correct amount of energy to bring to a cursed treasure. And most of the people in this video did not have that energy. Because this is the story of what happens when humans find the most valuable object imaginable. And the answer, historically, is immediately terrible things. A Roman general steals an entire sacred gold hoard, and the fallout is so complete that Romans are still quoting a phrase about his ruin 2,000 years later. A Turkish journalist spends 16 years recovering a stolen treasure, and then the very museum director who championed its return steals it himself, and his defense, more or less, is, "The treasure made me do it." And our number one entry is a genuine 4th century cursed ring, plowed up out of an English field, that J.R.R. Tolkien was personally asked to consult on in 1929 right before he sat down to write a little story about a cursed ring that destroys everyone who touches it. Welcome to the Dumb Ages. These are history's most cursed treasures, counted down from 6 to 1, least doomed to most doomed. Some of these victims were simply unlucky. Most of them, and I cannot stress this enough, absolutely had it coming. Let's begin. Number 6. The Karun treasure, or, as I like to call it, the guy who won. Picture Uşak province, in what's now western Turkey. It's the night of June 6, 1966. There is a burial chamber down there, holding the possessions of a Lydian princess, dead and buried for roughly 26 centuries. And a group of looters solve the delicate archaeological problem of how do we get in the way you'd expect from people who solve problems with explosives. They dynamite the roof. Out come 363 artifacts. Gold, jewelry, priceless Iron Age craftsmanship, all of it blasted loose and hustled off into the antiquities smuggling network. And here's where it gets shameless, because the buyer was not some shadowy villain in a warehouse. Between 1967 and 1970, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met, in New York, the fanciest address in the art world, quietly bought about 200 of these pieces for roughly $1.2 million. And they knew. Oh, they knew. Because they filed the whole haul under the label East Greek Treasure, which is museum speak for, "Please, for the love of God, do not ask where we got this." Enter our hero, Özgen Akar, a Turkish journalist, who looked at all this and decided it was going to be his entire personality for the next 16 years. 16 years of investigating. In 1987, Turkey sued the Met. The Met, an institution with lawyers, dug in and fought for 6 years until the pre-trial evidence came out. And the evidence was almost insultingly clean. Investigators had the wall paintings from the looted tomb, and the gaps in those tomb walls matched the missing sections exactly. Like the world's most damning jigsaw puzzle. The Met folded. In October of 1993, all 363 pieces went home. Happy ending, right? Justice. Except, the museum director who championed that return, a man named Kazim Akbiyikoglu, a genuine good guy in this story, was arrested in 2006 for stealing the collection's prized golden hippocampus brooch and swapping in a fake. He got 13 years. And his explanation? He blamed the curse. Sir, you did not get cursed. You got greedy. But we'll allow it. Because he ranks lowest on our list for a reason, everybody else here lost their heads. He only lost his mind, his career, and one very fancy seahorse. Number 5. The Hope Diamond. The one in the paper bag. We start in 1668. A French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier buys a rough blue stone in India weighing a hair over 112 carats and sells it to King Louis XIV for somewhere between 220,000 and 720,000 livres, a price range so vague it's basically a lot written in Old French. The king's jeweler, Jean Pitou, cuts it down to about 67 carats in 1678. Further recutting over the centuries brings it to its current 45.5 carats, a figure double-checked in December of 1988, because at some point somebody has to weigh the world's most famous cursed rock and write it down. Now, the curse's greatest hits. Louis XVI, guillotined in 1793. Marie Antoinette, guillotined in 1793. And then Evelyn Walsh McLean, an American heiress who owned it in the 20th century and had, let's say, a rough run. Her son died young, her daughter died young, and her husband was committed to a mental institution before dying in his early 50s. Spooky. Cursed. Case closed. Except, no. Because I promised you facts with receipts, and I have to be honest with you, the mainstream scholarly verdict on these curse stories is, and I'm quoting, "These accounts are specious." That's academic for somebody made this up and it got a really good marketing department. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were not beheaded by a diamond. They were beheaded by the French Revolution, which had a fairly full slate that decade and did not need jewelry-based assistance. But here's the part that makes the whole curse mythology feel small by comparison. In 1958, the jeweler Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Minus, and he mailed it. Registered U.S. mail. Plain brown paper. $2.44 in postage, and about $143 more to insure it for $1 million, a fraction of what it's worth. A gem now valued between $200 and $350 million, riding in the back of a mail truck like a birthday card from your aunt. Kings lost their heads over this stone, and Harry Winston sent it across the country the way you'd return a library book. That, my friends, is the correct energy for dealing with a cursed object. Respect it just enough to get it out of the building. Number 4. The Koh-i-Noor. The diamond with a very specific dietary restriction. In the 1740s, the Persian conqueror Nader Shah loots this stone from the Mughal peacock throne in Delhi. That's its first solid appearance in the historical record. It currently weighs 105.6 carats, down from 186 old carats before Prince Albert had it recut in 1852, because nothing says we conquered your empire like also filing down your national treasure to fix its sparkle. Here's the curse, and it is delightfully, oddly specific. The legend says only God, or women, can safely own the Koh-i-Noor. Any man who owns it is doomed. Assassination, blinding, exile, deposition, the full menu. And this ancient mystical curse? It started as a rumor printed in the Delhi Gazette, then got amplified by the Illustrated London News Minus, which makes it functionally an 1840s headline you didn't read past. But the receipts are genuinely uncomfortable here. Look at the men who held it before Britain, a parade of assassinations, blindings, and exiles. Then look at Maharaja Duleep Singh, the last Sikh emperor to possess it, forced to hand it over at 11 years old under the Treaty of Lahore in 1849. 11. He was then exiled and died in poverty in Paris. And once the diamond arrives in Britain, it is worn exclusively by women Queen Victoria, then Alexandra, then Mary, then Elizabeth the Queen Mother. Every single one of them lived a long life. It sits today in the Queen Mother's crown, in the Jewel House at the Tower of London, on a shelf behaving itself, because it knows exactly who's allowed to hold it. Centuries of conquest, assassination, and exile, and the whole thing got solved by putting a woman in charge. As lessons go, that one's free. Number 3. King Tut's Curse, the deadliest media hoax in history. November 29, 1922. Howard Carter's team formally opens Tomb KV-62, the tomb of Tutankhamun, and unleashes upon the world the single most famous curse of all time. There's just one small problem with the curse of the pharaohs, and it is a big one. There was no curse. There was no ominous inscription over the door promising death to trespassers. Egyptologists have confirmed this repeatedly. Nothing like that was found inside Tutankhamun's tomb. The curse was invented by newspapers. Because Ancient Boy King Found is a good story, but Ancient Boy King murders the living from beyond the grave, sells papers for years. The evidence they built the whole legend on was Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, who died on April 5, 1923 minus about 4 months after the opening. Suspicious! Supernatural! Except his cause of death was an infected mosquito bite that he accidentally sliced open while shaving, which turned into a skin infection, which turned into pneumonia. The official medical phrasing is pneumonia supervening on erysipelas, which is Latin for he nicked a bug bite and it went horribly wrong, which is tragic and mundane and has nothing to do with a teenager who died 3,000 years earlier. And now, the fact that detonates the entire curse. Howard Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb, the man who reached in and removed the pharaoh's mummy with his bare hands. If anyone was getting cursed, it was this guy. He suffered exactly 0 consequences. He lived another 16 years, dying in 1939 of lymphoma at 64, comfortably in bed, uncursed. And of the 58 people present at the opening, only 8 died within the next 12 years, which, for a group of adults over a 12-year span, is a wildly normal number of people. The curse's aim was, statistically, terrible. Now, in fairness, there is one mundane explanation that's kind of metal. A fungus called Aspergillus flavus can survive sealed in tombs for millennia and cause lethal lung infections in people with weakened immune systems. Scientists are divided on whether it actually killed anyone here. But I love it as a concept, because it means the closest thing to a real mummy's curse is not vengeful magic. It's mold. Ancient, patient, weaponized mildew. Number 2. The gold of Tolosa, and Rome's single greediest man. Around 106 BC, a Roman proconsul named Quintus Servilius Caepio marches into Tolosa, modern Toulouse, in France Minimus, and seizes an absolutely staggering treasure hoard. How staggering? Well, the ancient sources can't even agree on how much he stole, which is sort of poetic. Strabo says 15,000 talents of gold and silver. Justinus and Orosius say 100,000 pounds of gold plus 100 and 10,000 pounds of silver, give or take whatever Strabo was on that day. And here's the chilling part. One theory holds this gold was already cursed loot, that it included treasure the Gauls had stripped from the Temple of Apollo at Delphi during their invasion in 280 to 279 BC. So Caepio didn't just steal a fortune, he stole a fortune that had already been stolen from a god. Rookie mistake. Because the second he tried to move it, the universe filed its paperwork. Caepio sent the gold under armed military escort toward Massilia Ninus, and it vanished. Gone. Poof. The soldiers guarding it were ambushed and killed, and the treasure was never accounted for. Everyone, naturally, assumed Caepio pocketed it himself. He was accused of theft, put on trial, stripped of his Roman citizenship, fined 15,000 talents, millet, the entire value of the hoard, which he insisted he did not have, and exiled to Smyrna, where he died. And that was the good part of his year, because in 105 BC, his army walked into the Battle of Arausio against Germanic tribes and suffered one of the worst military defeats in the entire history of Rome. The Romans were so struck by this man's spectacular downfall that they coined a proverb about it, Aurum habet Tolosanum. He has the gold of Tolosa. It meant that ill-gotten wealth brings nothing but ruin, and people kept saying it for 2,000 years. But the curse wasn't done, because it went generational. Caepio's son died in battle. His grandson died of illness. And his great-grandson? A man named Marcus Junius Brutus. Yes, that Brutus. The one who assassinated Julius Caesar and then died at the Battle of Philippi. The greed of one Roman general echoed down 4 generations and helped end the Roman Republic. That is not a curse. That is a family subscription plan. And number 1, the Ring of Silvianus. The actual One Ring. In 1785, a farmer plowing a field near Silchester, in Hampshire, England, turns up a chunky gold signet ring. 25 millimeters across, 12 grams of gold, an image of the goddess Venus carved into the face, and an inscription scratched in mirror writing, Seniciane vivas, inde. It dates to the 4th century AD. Lovely find. But by itself, it's just a ring. The ring only becomes cursed when you drive 70 miles away, to Lydney Park in Gloucestershire, where archaeologists found a small lead tablet, a Roman curse tablet, the ancient world's version of a strongly worded review. And it reads, "To the god Nodens, Silvianus has lost a ring, he hereby gives half of its value to Nodens. Among those called Silvianus, grant no health until he brings it to the temple of Nodens." Read that again. A Roman named Silvianus lost his ring. Correctly guessed who took it, a man named Silvianus de Menis, and did not go to the police. He went to a god. He filed a divine lawsuit. He bribed a deity with half the ring's value and asked for one thing, that the thief know no health, no peace, no rest, until the cursed gold ring is returned to its rightful place. A cursed gold ring. An owner who cannot escape doom until it goes back where it belongs. And here is why this one is number one. In 1929, an archaeologist named Mortimer Wheeler was excavating that very temple site at Lydney Park, and he needed an expert on the strange god name Nodens from the curse tablet. So he called in a philologist from Oxford to consult. That philologist was J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien personally studied a real, ancient, cursed gold ring, bound to a curse of no health until it is returned. And then, in the years that followed, he wrote the definitive story of a cursed gold ring whose owner cannot escape its doom. Sometimes the treasure doesn't kill you. Sometimes it just quietly hands its curse to a storyteller and lets him hand it to the entire world. So what's the pattern? Because there is one. The Hope Diamond was mailed across a country in a paper bag, and kings still lost their heads over it. One Roman's greed spawned a proverb that outlived his entire civilization. A journalist spent 16 years rescuing a treasure, and the treasure got its own museum director in the end anyway. And an Oxford professor glanced at one furious Roman's lost ring and turned it into the most famous curse in all of fiction. The lesson of the Dumb Ages is remarkably consistent. Humanity finds the most valuable thing imaginable, and the most valuable thing imaginable immediately ruins us. Every time. So if you ever dig up a suspiciously beautiful gold ring in a field, do the smart thing. Do the Harry Winston. Wrap it in brown paper, slap $2 of postage on it, and mail it directly to somebody you don't like.